I think it should be really time frame, it might be a little tight, but yeah, it's definitely. Yeah, gonna definitely address some.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, that's a good
Yeah, definitely. The other thing that's gonna
right.
Good morning, everyone. I want to first welcome everyone to the first meeting of the Coastal Resiliency. For those that don't know me yet or haven't met me yet, my name is Travis Boyles. I'm the Acting Secretary of Natural and Historic Resources. I have also been designated by the Governor as the Chief Resiliency Officer for the Commonwealth. Many of you know the Youngkin administration has prioritized our work on resiliency, and I'm excited for today and the efforts that this group will accomplish. This group was formalized by legislation this year from Senator Marsden and Delegate Bulova. I believe Delegate Bulova is going to be joining us virtually, and maybe the Senator will be joining us in person here soon. And we want to recognize their efforts. But it's a continuation of an administratively created group established to support the development of the first phase of the Coastal Resilience Master Plan. Since today is the first meeting of the group in its current incarnation, we're going to focus on getting organized, getting everyone up to speed where things stand with regards to state-led resilience efforts in Virginia, and discussing the next steps. Additionally, for now, the TAC is comprised of members required by statute. We will likely add more members in the future, but as we get organized, we thought it best to start with this quarter. I do want to note the meeting is being recorded, and we have a number of participants online as well. With that, I would appreciate if we could go around the room and do introductions. I'll start with my right here.
Great, thanks, Secretary. I'm Matt Wells, I'm the Director of the Department of Conservation and Recreation.
I'm Corey Scott, the Assistant Secretary of Natural and Historic Resources.
Michael Perez, Special Assistant, Diversity, Opportunity, and Inclusion.
Joe Howell, representing Commander Navy, Region Mid-Atlantic, out of Norfolk. Ben McFarland, Hampton Roads Planning District Commission.
Sarah Stewart, Plan RBA.
Jay Rufo with Greater PDC.
Sean Crumlish, Executive Director, Virginia Resources Authority.
Norman Goulet, Northern Virginia Regional Commission.
Troy Hartley, Virginia Sea Grant.
Rowan Weiss, Center for Coastal Study at Virginia Tech.
Karen McGlathery, University of Virginia Environmental Resilience Institute.
Chris Swanson, VDOT Environmental Division.
Mike Fitch, Virginia Transportation Research Council.
John Bateman, Northern Neck Planning District Commission.
Aaron Sutton, Chief Deputy State Coordinator, VDEM.
Brian Hallberg, the District Commander for Army Corps of Engineers.
Bill Curtis, Assistant Director of Housing and Community Development.
Evan Bernowski, Chief Stormwater Policy Advisor, Department of Environmental Quality.
Carol Ponzo, Director of Line Projects, Institute for Coastal Adaptation and Resilience at WU.
Jamie Green, Commissioner of the Marcy.
Randy Allman, Chief of the Marine Resources Division, Habitat Management Division.
Elizabeth Andrews, Director of Coastal Policy.
Mark Lukenbach, Associate Dean of Research at Virginia State.
Do we have any members of the TAC online that would like to introduce themselves?
We have a couple, but they're not moving.
Okay. Well, we may come back to that. Thank you all, and thank you all for being here today, and looking forward to it. Before we go any further, I also want to thank the staff from the Department of Conservation and Recreation and the Coastal Zone Management Program staff for providing all the support that you've that have led to today, and all the support that they'll provide moving forward. I know that we have some DCR staff here today, maybe some CZ and program staff as well. I want to ensure that they introduce themselves and we acknowledge them.
Darrell Glover, Deputy Director of DCR for Dam Safety, Floodplain Management, and Stormwater Conservation.
We have Road Division Director for Dam Safety Floodplain Management. Dr. Olivia Beeline, Virginia Sea Grant, DCR.
Matt Dallin, Flood Resilience Program Manager.
I'm Andrew Smith, Chief Deputy Director of DCR.
Sarah Golan, Policy Assistant.
Thank you, everyone. So we'll go through a number of presentations today, including a discussion about the specific roles of this TAC, but I want to speak generally for a moment about the administration's approach to resiliency. First, this is a problem that we are very much so committed to addressing head on through this administration. While this TAC will primarily be focused on coastal Virginia, we recognize this is not just a coastal problem. So as we work towards addressing this issue, we want to do so with programs that work for all impacted Virginians and all areas of Virginia. Second, this is not just a problem that any one jurisdiction, department, group can solve. So that's part of the reason why we're here today, why the legislature was wise enough to form this council. For us to effectively chart a path forward towards a more resilient Virginia, we want to do so with programs, projects in a comprehensive manner that fit into a cohesive effort. This will ensure that we're being effective with our efforts and our funding. The Coastal Resiliency Master Plans and the Virginia Flood Protection Master Plan have an important role to play in that regard, and I know that we will get into both of those later on today. Third, we need to approach this problem with transparency. That includes in the programs that we implement, the policy decisions that we make. With transparency comes trust, and accountability. Both of these are absolutely necessary as we continue to address this issue. If we keep these principles in mind, I'm confident that the work we do with this group and the work that the broader administration does will be meaningful and beneficial to everyone in the Commonwealth. Part of the role of the Chief Resiliency Officer, or CRO, is to work with the Director of the Department of Conservation and Recreation, DCR, to establish the TAC. I know many of y'all have known Director Wells for much longer than I have. And I know having him as part of the administration is probably one of the wisest moves that we've made this year. I can't claim any credit for that. It was done prior to me starting. And I know we'll benefit from his leadership as we move forward with this group and our resiliency efforts overall in the Commonwealth. DCR is at the heart of this a significant portion of resiliency efforts for the Commonwealth. In addition to supporting this TAC, they're responsible for the updated coastal resiliency master plans, the Virginia Flood Protection Master, the administration of the Community Flood Preparedness Fund, and the administration of the new Resilient Virginia Revolving Loan Fund. DCR staff and their expertise are critical to our resiliency efforts moving forward. In addition to their statutory duties, I've asked Director Wells to convene a working group to discuss how we can better coordinate our resiliency efforts across the various state agencies and how we better coordinate and access funding, technical assistance, and other efforts internally within the state. With that in mind, I've also approved the delegation of authorities of powers and duties enumerated in the code and granted to me by the governor for the CRO position to Director Wells. As you will see today, I will need to step out of the meeting for a limited amount of time, and this will ensure that we have a seamless continuation of leadership on these efforts moving forward through today and moving forward through the rest of the administration. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Director Wells to take us through the next part of the meeting.
Thank you, Secretary Wells. So we're going to step through a number of presentations. I will give some of them, and staff can give some of them. Before we get into that, though, I know we've got Delegate Bulova online. I think he was interested in saying a few words. So as the patron of the legislation that has brought us all here together, we want to give him the opportunity to address the group. So,
great. Yeah, thank you very much, Director Wells. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, thank you, and also thank you very much, Secretary Boyles, and what just an amazing group that we got sitting around the table to go ahead and work through some extremely technical and complicated issues. And yeah, I just really wanted to say thank you very much, for what you're doing, and give you a chance for me to go ahead and say a couple words. And I think we all recognize that there are very few more fundamental threats to Virginia's economy and our quality of life than coastal flooding and sea level rise. And you don't have to go too far to see different reports about what those impacts are going to be. And it was timely. This morning I opened up my usual newspaper clips, and there was yet another example with Old Dominion University, I think, predicting a $97 billion impact to Virginia's economy as a result of sea level rise if nothing else changes by the end of the century. And so that's absolutely eye-opening, and it really just highlights the obligation that we have as public servants to make sure that we are protecting our residents and our businesses from the impacts of climate change and sea level rise to the extent possible. And I think the important part about this process is it's not just protecting public infrastructure. I mean, that's extraordinarily important. Those are major investments that the people have made in Virginia, but it's also private infrastructure as well. And we rely very heavily on private infrastructure for all aspects of our quality of life in Virginia. When I say thank you, I want to acknowledge that a lot of work has already gone into Coastal Resilience Master Plan process, a lot of work. And so what that initial plan highlighted was that this is something that can't sit on a shelf. It needs to be a living document. And so that's, I was very pleased to go ahead and sponsor House Bill 516. And I know Senator Marsden is also one that's sponsored the Senate counterpart. And it really is a testament that this is something that has gotten started and again, is just so critical to the well-being of Virginia that we wanted to make sure that that was captured in the code and that the responsibilities were statutory responsibilities in addition to everything else. Let me just wrap up by saying as a legislator, I know that it can be very easy for us to put in a piece of legislation establishing a technical advisory committee without thinking about the hours and hours of time and effort from experts across Virginia and across the nation, the time that those individuals put into actually making the documents, putting the documents together, putting together recommendations. And I just wanted to say that I do recognize the enormity, the weight of what you are trying to do, what you have done, what you will do. And that's something that we recognize and that is incredibly important for Virginia. So again, I just wanted to say thank you. Your work is absolutely critical to the success and future of Virginia, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Bull. Enjoyed working with you on this issue. Look forward to continuing it. Appreciate you acknowledging the staff. They have put a tremendous amount of work into this. We got a great team at DCR, and they're committed to this. Very much appreciate the trust that the Secretary has placed in us to tackle this very important issue. And his kind words, I'll try not to mess it up too badly. So with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the task roles and responsibilities. The Secretary provided kind of a high-level framework, but there are some specific roles that the statute designates to us, so we want to go to that on the PowerPoint. There you go. All right. As the Secretary mentioned, in his role as Chief Resilience Officer in coordination with me and the SACAP, he's established this Technical Advisory Committee, the purpose of which is to assist in developing, updating, and implementing the Coastal Resilience Master Plan. There are some specific deliverables that the committee has, and those will come into play a little bit later when we talk about organization and potential subcommittees. So the TAC is designed to ensure that risk evaluations and project prioritization protocols are regularly updated and informed by the best science, that statewide and regional needs are addressed using best applicable science and long-term resilience approaches, and that the Virginia Coastal Resilience Master Plan framework is adhered to in the development and updating of the CRMP. Go to the next one. So that's kind of, those are the deliverables here, is sort of what we're going to be doing going forward. The TAC is required to meet quarterly. This is the first quarterly meeting. We may have supplemental meetings as well. And like I said, we talk about subcommittees or maybe meetings for subcommittees in between. At each meeting, we will hear an update about the progress of the flood protection master plan. We will hear about updates to the Coastal Resilience Master Plan. And once we get a little bit further down the road on the flood protection master plan, this group may be called upon to assist DCR with the development of that document. Again, as we proceed today, we'll talk more about the Coastal Resilience Plan and the statewide plan. I know some of us have lived this for a while, but some folks are kind of coming to it fresh. The Secretary mentioned that there was an administrative group that this legislation sort of formalized. It's a slightly different composition here, so we wanted part of the meeting today is going to be bringing everyone up to speed. This is the list of the entities that are on here. It's a large group. It's a large group here today. We don't have all of the members here, and so again, as the Secretary said, for today, we wanted to make sure that we had all of the folks that are designated statute here around the table to get ourselves organized, and then we can start to draw the circle out a little bit bigger as appropriate. So, any questions about the roles and responsibilities of that? Fairly straightforward. We'll talk more about it. So this is a public body. We are subject to the Freedom of Information Act. And so we're going to have a brief presentation about FOIA, so we all know what we should and should not do, again, to make sure that we're proceeding in a transparent fashion. So, Matt?
All these slides are in your handouts, or you probably see on the screen in front of you. Again, Matt Allen, Department of Conservation and Recreation. First going through FOIA, our public body. And so there are code requirements and regulations that we need to adhere to. Really, all of these public meetings are open. All records are open. And we're going to go through just some highlights of what we need to adhere by. If you have any questions today or any follow-ups, please let us know. Not the FOIA expert, but we will reach out to people that are and provide those answers to you. So, all right, so FOIA, this is the right for the public to know what public business is being transacted. We are a public body meeting here today. This meeting is being live streamed. Again, members of the public are more than welcome to attend. If there are violations, there are fines that are applicable. The fine is to the individual, not to the body itself. So just be aware of that. There are some exemptions to FOIA and what documents can and need to be disclosed that are relatively limited and prescribed in code. So we will adhere to those requirements as we move forward. There's two key pillars of FOIA that we're going to go through. One, public meetings, the other, public records. So first, public records. Everything that we cover, all the documents presented here will be made publicly available. Email communications are also subject to FOIA. Many here are in public role, and already have those requirements, but anything regarding this body is also subject to FOIA regulations. You might have gotten an email from Flood.Resilience at DCR out of Virginia. That is another email account that we have for us. It keeps records for us, especially if there's any changes in staff, that continuity is there. And so if you see emails coming out from that account, that is still from us, and it may pertain to the TAC and other business related to the TAC. Again, those emails will all be subject to public disclosure with some few exceptions. So all of our documents, recordings, there will be minutes made available from these meetings. Draft minutes need to be posted in 10 working days, and then after the adoption of minutes, those meetings need to be made available. We'll be using regulatory town hall to be posting minutes, agenda, this draft and file. So that will be the main forum for the public disclosure for this body. What records you need to keep? We'll be maintaining a lot of records. So if there are presentations done by others, either members of staff, other advisors, or other public that are invited to attend and present, we will maintain copies of those presentations, make them available to the public. But again, all of your emails are subject to FOIA, and not just emails from us or the department, but emails to each other related to what the TAC is here to do. It's all subject. Meetings, all of the meetings are out in the public. Closed session meetings for this TAC. What constitutes a meeting? Here today are formal quarterly meetings, public meetings. Any subcommittee meetings are also public meetings. Informal meetings. So no more than 3 TAC members may convene without it being a public meeting. So that goes for in-person, telephone calls, email, chat room, group text, Can't have 3 people discussing the business of the TAC without providing ample notice to the public that that meeting is going to occur. And that meeting is an open meeting that the public can attend to. So there needs to be discussions, should be limited to no more than 2 members of the TAC. When we need to meet, well, we have our quarterly meetings, any other votes, and really just for all official TAC business. Electronic meetings. So we cannot conduct a wholly electronic meeting right now per code. So all meetings will need to be in person. This is TAC meeting as well as the subcommittee meetings as well. And last year we had a lot of subcommittees and a lot of meetings, and that was facilitated through virtual meetings. Different this year, not allowed to do that. But there are allowances for electronic participation in a meeting that is being held in person and held open to the public. So with certain exceptions, if you have a medical emergency or a personal matter for which you cannot attend the in-person meeting, you may email the chair and let them know you're not able to attend. By sending that email, it's back to approved, but you are limited to 2 remote participation per year, or 25% of the meetings for that year. And that's applied to the appointment. So if you have an alternate or designee together, you may only attend 2 meetings remotely. So there's few circumstances, and the remote attendance is for really to be able to participate and vote. Anybody can view the meeting in public. If you are not able to attend a meeting, and we have some signed on today, you can always register and watch the meeting. In order to participate in a voting action, and to contribute to the dialogue, you need to provide notice, and then we record that, put that in minutes, and there are limitations on that. So just please be aware. I think we covered most of this, President, providing notice. If you have any other medical conditions that prevent you from attending in person, please send us that information if possible. When sending it to the chair, please copy flood resilience at DCR, Virginia.gov, just so we can see it as well and try to help maintain those. Again, we covered most of this. What's considered a meeting? Any time the business is discussed by more than 2 members. So once you put that 3rd member in there, it becomes a public meeting. So group emails do not apply to all. We will try to, for the most part, we'll be DCCing you on our email distributions to try to restrict and prohibit replying to all. But once we start replying to all and more than 2 people engage in that dialogue, it becomes a public meeting. So we're just trying not to violate the FOIA rules and requirements. The TAC, we are here to support you all in this. So we'll be helping establish the time and location of the meetings. There are a lot of Google polls to be coming out, unless something's already established for when and where the meetings will be. We're posting on the DCR website, on Regulatory Town Hall, is where these meetings will be posted. The agenda gets posted at least 10 working days prior to the meeting, and will also be distributed to you all. You'll be sending another invitation as well. We're recording the meetings. We make those recordings available through Town Hall at the DCR website, and then again, we'll be making the minutes and distributions of read materials, as well as any follow-up materials that are discussed as well. For example, these packets that you all have, the presentations, this will all be made available.
What I'm saying, in addition, one of the roles of staff is if you do have materials or information that you want provided to the group, email them to staff, and we will send them around. That's helpful for FOIA purposes. And that was that email address again?
It's flood.resilience@DCR.Virginia.gov. Send it to me, it works, but just having a singular one works through, because we can delegate that to people as people come and go. The TAC is here in code, so unless some change, so we want to have those records for long term available. It's much easier to search and find things.
And we'll send around staff contact materials for the meetings. know where to send those. Any questions about FOIA? Again, I know a lot of you all know this already, that you've served on the boards, but it's good to get a reminder. So the next item on the agenda is to discuss a charter for the group. This is in your materials. I apologize, we weren't able to provide it beforehand. We'll step through it. A lot of this is pulled straight from code, straight from FOIA, or is fairly standard Robert's rules type stuff. But we did think it was important for the group to have an operating document so that everybody understands the purpose and how we're going to conduct business. So man, you want to hit the highlights.
Yes. Okay, so this is just an overview of some of the highlights that we're going to go through today, but you have a full copy of this draft charter in your handouts. And we can distribute these to you all electronically as well. Just wanted to run through some specific sections in here. So first, membership. That's saying what section 1.3 in the membership. Bring your attention to items D, E, and F. And government chair, they invite other representatives to serve on the tag. You may designate whoever was called out to code to serve on the tag, may designate somebody within that organization to serve for them. Either the designee or that tag member that was called out to code can also list an alternate. If you were not able to attend in person, you can send your alternate. Please let us know if you haven't already who your alternate may be, so that we can get them an name tag, get them in our records, and include them in the distributions. But we want that alternate to be a consistent person and not kind of a revolving door of staff from the agency just to rise. We are assisting as well as safety and coastal zone management. Next section to bring your attention to is within the meetings, section 2.3, forum and method of voting. For this committee, item A, any meeting, those members present physically at the meeting shall constitute a quorum. We are able to define what a quorum will be for the committee. That is what is in this draft right now. So whoever is here in person and present, plus remote attendees, per these exceptions, that is the quorum. Those to vote. Any questions on the question?
So there is no 2/3 or anything like that. It's just like it was last year.
Correct. So for this body now moving forward, if this charter is adopted, those present will be, there are certain circumstances, and it's outlined within the charter, where voting to carry a recommendation or motion, that I think there's a supermajority requirement.
Rule suspension.
Yes. So for certain items within here, we do need more people or certain numbers. And so that's what this document is a clear definition of what those rules, how we're going to operate.
Do you know what's part of that document is where you would have to have a majority or super majority? So
I think we're gonna talk about voting.
Yeah. So
okay.
Within that same section 2.3, C. So motions decided by the majority of members present. So when voting, we establish the quorum because we're having a meeting in public. If there is a motion that's put forward, the majority of members present will pass. If there's a tie, we have 16 people here present and 8 vote pass. And so that's how most of the business will be.
Part of the reason for the forum rule, that this is a large group, and we don't want to struggle to get a forum that might allow people to participate electronically. We have to have a forum for people to be able to participate electronically. But we do have some further on in here, we talk a little bit about notice before we're doing any sort of recommendations or voting or anything like that. So let's bring that on.
Thank you.
Right, and that's the next item D in section 2.3. So if there is going to be a recommendation made, we need to provide that needs to be done by consensus, and when the consensus is not possible, or, yes, recommendations, maybe adopt majority, sorry, is the last one. Dissenting, the members dissenting, they provide a minority report. Make those recommendations. So we do still want to capture that information if there has that for any recommendations.
So kind of put a finer point on this. We're not, this group, if this is adopted, would not move on any recommendations unless there is notice given that we're going to vote on a recommendation prior to the meeting. Again, we don't want to spring anything on anyone. Our goal would be to adopt those recommendations on a consensus basis. If we can get to it. If we're not able to get to a consensus and the group still feels like it should adopt a recommendation, that can be done by a majority vote. But we are preserving a minority report essentially for folks that think the recommendation is proper. Again, trying to strike a balance between operating by consensus and reflecting the view of everyone, and also acknowledging it's a large group that make it larger as it leads to the function.
Thank you for the clarification.
Just for clarity, section 2-34, method of voting, the first subsection A is clear, right? Those members of the TAC physically present constitute a quorum. But B says all questions submitted to the TAC shall be determined by recorded votes. C, unless otherwise specified, the motion shall be decided by majority of members present and voting. Are you meaning physically present or physically and virtually? I just think it'd be helpful to clarify that.
For those purposes, we have anticipated physically and virtually.
Both.
Yep.
So it might be helpful just to clarify those things because we are kind of bouncing them back and forth, right? You're saying you got to be physically present for a quorum. You don't have to be physically present for a vote. So I guess I'm proposing an amendment to C and say by majority of members physically and virtually present. Am I allowed to propose an amendment?
Yeah, we'll hold amendments until the end.
I just think
If we engage in more discussion here for the participants that are on remotely, if you could just announce who you are before speaking, because they cannot see yet. That'd be helpful. Section 2.4 provides additional details on the policy for remote participation in the meeting. So I covered most of that. It's quite lengthy, but if you do, and if you have any questions on that, please let us know. We can work to address those. Or there's the ability to make changes to these documents. Section 3, the officers, the chair, Chief Resilience Officer, Chair will be Director Wells through delegated authority as of now. The Vice Chair shall be the SACAP, Special Assistant to the Governor on Coastal Adaptation and Protection, should one be appointed. But then there's also the Chair may appoint additional Vice Chairs and officers as they deem necessary. So we may expand, similar to expanding membership, there's also designate Vice Chairs. Public comment, section 4.3. There will be a public comment period, 20 minutes set aside at every meeting. It's to occur at the end of the meeting. Those wishing to provide public comment in person are asked to sign up. And we put that on the sign-in sheet this morning. And so that sign-in sheet is in the back. We'll collect the other one if we've had some more people come in since we've had it. Please sign up so we know how many people are doing public comment. We're also going to be, for the online participants, they can also provide public comment as well. We need to know who's looking to do that. So if you're online, would like to provide public comment, please enter your name, organization, location into the chat so that we can be prepared to make that available for you. The meeting agenda, section 4.4. Again, the agenda will be posted at least 10 working days, 14 calendar days prior to our meeting. Anytime we provide you all with information, we have to make that information publicly available at the same time. So it will get posted on town hall as well as it get distributed to the TAC members by email. Section 4.7, Robert's Rules of Order, carry how this committee will proceed. Agenda items. So section 5.1, matters to get added to the agenda. So there's per code, the updates to coastal zoning master plan, update progress report on the flood protection plan. But should you wish to add any other items, the chair may add to the agenda at the request of a member. The chair's concurrence can add an item to the agenda for next meeting. Or by the majority of members present voting, may also add items to the agenda for the next meeting, so that we can put notice out of what's going on. Appointments, section 6, lastly, the chair may establish standing or ad hoc subcommittees for the TAC. Will be at least 2 members of the TAC, but the chair may also appoint other individuals to subcommittees who are not members of the TAC. So we can have additional input on those subcommittees with the chair's designation and individuals' consent to serve. Advisors may be appointed. So an advisor, similar to the TAC members, able to be here to participate in discussion, but would not be partaking in voting. They're just here to engage in discussion, but will not have standing for voting. And lastly, attendance. We know this meetings can be done quarterly, people here, but we do want to expect you all to try to make your best effort to show up and help really provide the advice for how we proceed. Those things and walk through what those things plan.
So, well, I come at the end, we would maybe ask for clarity. But if you look at section 2-3A, it basically says whatever the members are, doesn't give a percentage or a number. If there's 3 members there, that's 4. That, if you get into section 2-4B, it just struck me with the first line that an individual member may participate in a remote location only if a quorum of the TAC is physically assembled. So a quorum is whoever is physically assembled. Right? It just lets them.
No, that is somewhat intentional, again, so that we don't preclude participation electronically for lack of a quorum. The idea is to establish a quorum.
Are you also saying that just means you can't be completely virtual?
Correct. There has to be, somebody has to be in person. Yep. If the body wants to set a minimum number, then that. Any other? So understanding that this, you all are looking at this for the first time today, I don't know what the comfort level is on adopting with Elizabeth's suggested amendment. So kind of take a little group. Do you want more time to sit with this, or do you want to proceed on it? These, per the charter, we can't amend it by a majority vote. So always go back and squeeze things later, but again, don't want to push the group to a vote if you're not ready. Do you want more time with this document? Elizabeth, did you have any other?
No, I think I was just double checking. I was trying to make sure we don't have a definition of quorum in the right text.
Our guidance was that the body could establish the definition of quorum.
So I'm going to take Elizabeth's suggested amendment to 3C as a friendly amendment. So that would now read, unless otherwise specified in the TAC charter, motion shall be decided by a majority of members present physically and virtually and voting. Okay, so we are comfortable proceeding. I would take a motion to accept the charter. Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All right, all in favor of adopting, say aye. Any opposed? All right, appreciate it. That, I think, is all of the preliminaries, and now we can actually get to talk about the subject matter.
Just for voting, we can do this test vote, we have to report it in minutes. If anybody either abstains or votes against, they may ask for a roll call on the vote, and then we'll have to go through the roll call and record the votes.
Appreciate it. So I think next up, we're going to talk a little bit about legislation in this session. Obviously, this is a legislatively constituted group, but there was a whole bunch of stuff that happened in 2022. And so you're going to get a lot of that down for the next hour or so.
All right, so a review of some of the highlights of the 2022 General Assembly legislation, really specifically related to bills that focus on impacts the efforts we're doing with regards to coastal resilience. Not that it meant it's an all-encompassing legislative review, trying to give you all the highlights, and then there's a lot more text in the presentation, in the documents with references to those specific code sections and bills, should you want additional. So we've got 4 bills to discuss, and then the budget bill will be the last item that we're going to work through. So first up is House Bill 551, Senate Bill, House Bill 516, Senate Bill 551. That was going to cover in a couple slides because there were a lot of great changes to our work here. Again, a re-emphasis of the General Assembly's support of this work, and that we should prioritize community scale efforts, try to address socioeconomic inequities. Really, it's kind of an adoption of master planning framework principles as to how we proceed. We're going to do this work through the implementation of the plans. The plans being Coastal Resilience Master Plan, the Flood Protection Master Plan. At the last page of your handouts are some key acronyms. So we try not to read you all out that soon. Some of these are mouthful. So that is on the back of the handout. So getting into some more details of this, and the department has been designated responsible for implementation and development of these plans, and that these plans are updated at least every 5 years moving forward. So there's been some changes in the coordination section of code. There was the ability for DCR to convene members from different agencies. Now that it's required to have it on an annual basis, that there's going to be a coordination meeting to discuss. There's a longer list in code, more than what's present here in the text, of who needs to come together and discuss what we do with flood resilience. They codified, the same bill codified this committee here, and provided the objectives and the member list. Provided a deadline for phase 2 of the Coastal Resilience Master Plan and what needs to be included in that document. All major flood hazards, including precipitation-driven flooding, a list, an updated list of all the projects and what's been done, and then a comprehensive risk assessment of critical and natural infrastructure. We'll hit that one again in a few more slides. It also created the requirement for a community outreach engagement plan. That needs to be done by the end of this year. And the purpose, defined purpose for code is to really increase access and opportunity into the plan that we're doing. Again, in the Coastal Resilience Master Plan and the statewide flood protection master plan. How do we increase access and opportunity to engage in that planning process? How do the decision makers seek out that input and actually use that input in the decision? And then lastly is the deadline for the statewide flood protection master plan update. that is due no later than the end of calendar year 2026. Additional changes to the powers of the department, some more clarification on the statewide flood protection master plan, which was formerly just the Virginia flood protection plan. So now added as master plan.
We're just going to call that the statewide plan.
Yeah. They adopted the framework principles essentially using best available science, socioeconomic inequities, promoting natural-based solutions, try to use community and regional scale planning, and cost effective. Those 5 items you'll hear a lot today. Consistent throughout code and through plans coming largely from the framework document. Again, the DCR is the lead administrator responsible for implementing and integrating the plans. So code says we need to integrate coastal resilience master plan and statewide flood protection. Still more on House Bill 516. Next one is the status of flood resilience in the Commonwealth. The Chief Resilience Officer has been designated to provide a report to the Governor and the General Assembly every 2 years starting next July. So July of 23, a report will be provided. In that report, again, evaluation of critical human and natural infrastructure, similar to what was in the fire and lands. What are the risks to this infrastructure? And what is the overall status of resilience planning within the Commonwealth? So we've got community outreach engagement plan this year. In July, it is the status of the flood resilience report of next year. And in 24, it's the master plan. Another update. This report, so there's a lot of reports coming out every other year. Good to just document status. More clarifications. This is now House Bill 517. Change the designation of the Chief Resilience Officer. Was kind of de facto as secretary. Now the governor can appoint whomever they see fit for that position. And kind of just more clarification of the Chief Resilience Officer and some of the roles in there to oversee flood protection and planning, which was in as well. And then just clean up where it was listed because it's previously listed in policy. So I was moved out of that section, moved over to Secretary of Land Resources. Moving on, House Bill 1309, Senate Bill 756, the Resilient Virginia Revolving Loan Fund. So a new loan fund was created through the General Assembly. It's been capitalized through the budget. $25 million from the flood fund has been allocated for this revolving loan fund. Loans and grants accessible to local governments for resilient projects. And the resilient projects are pretty broad. It is defined in the code, but it's pretty broad. So good support really helps in the cash flow for grants. Again, DCR, similar to the Community Flood Preparedness Fund, DCR will administer this revolving loan fund with the money and coming through VRA. And these work together to establish guidelines for this new fund. Those guidelines will be put out in public comments, and a review committee will be established to review the applications for that fund. First round applications early next year. I'm able to proceed that, but that's what we're working towards.
And just to put a little bit more perspective on that, I think our goal would be to align this program with the Community Flood Preparedness Fund and send them out together because there's so much overlap and similarity. They do slightly different things, but it probably makes sense to have them go together so that people can evaluate which program is right with our friends at the RA.
Next bill that we put in here is House Bill 354, Senate Bill 315, Virginia Military Community Infrastructure Grant Program and Fund. So more funding opportunities for localities. If you are supporting a military community, which means 5% of your community's economy is coming from military-related funding. You are available for this grant to help with planning. So it's there for military readiness, installation resiliency, quality of life. This is for outside fence line. So if your community supports DOD, similar to a JLUS plan, coming up with plans to increase military readiness, transportation, housing. This again just ties in more planning money available for communities in support of flood resilience, as well as overall resilience. Collectively, the budget bill from our partners that are represented here receive some money for flood resilience. Just wanted to highlight that ODU got $1.5 million for the next 2 fiscal years. Basins has money and staffing in there as well. So we have opportunities for partnership and collaboration to try to execute this.
So there's a lot of action in 2022. Before we proceed to the next portion to talk about the Coastal Resilience Master Plan and update on where phase 1 landed and what we're potentially looking at for phase 2, I think Senator Marsden, who is responsible for some of the legislation we just talked about, is on the phone. So I want to give him an opportunity to address the group. So Senator Marsden, if you are there, the floor is yours. Senator, are they to stand by while we try to unmute you?
Should be. Senator Marsden, you should be able to unmute yourself. He is unmuted.
All right, Senator, if you we can hear you. We're having some technical difficulty with policies.
Yeah, it's going between muted and unmuted.
Okay. I think you have the ability to call in.
Don't move.
If you give me this number, I can call here and put on.
All right, Senator, we'll come back. You have the steps to try to figure out the main block you giving us a call. So we'll suspend on that for just a second, and then once you're ready, we can pick the Senator back up. But Matt, you want to start talking about the Coastal Resilience Master Plan? All right. So Coastal Resilience Master Plan was put together last year. I guess it was finalized at the beginning of the year. Matt's gonna. We got copies. Matt's gonna take us through what's in it and what we're looking to do for the next phase. So Matt, go ahead and feel free as we go along for this. Ask questions as we go, and then we'll pause at the end. Provide opportunity. Yep.
Apologies for the technical challenges. First academic. We didn't start from scratch, right? Last year, this has been a continuation of efforts within the Commonwealth. Coastal Zone Management Program, different PDCs, different executive actions have really led up to what we've done, and now it's been codified. So we've made a lot of progress over time. Continue to really look forward to making more progress working with you all. So this is in the document itself. If you want to look at it in more detail, I recognize you probably cannot see that on the ground. An overview, some of you all were not participating in the next year, new appointees, new members. I just wanted to give you an overview of what we did, where we're doing it, and where we're looking to go. Coastal Virginia, not a lot of ocean front shoreline, but a lot of tidal shoreline, especially up in the bay and rivers. Got everything 10,000 miles of shoreline, a lot of shoreline to address. That's all being impacted by sea level rise and storm surge. For the project, master plan established 4 master planning regions, which are made up of some 1 to 3 of the 8 coastal PDCs. So we had Fall Line North, Fall Line South, rural Virginia, and then Hampton Roads. So that's how they're all grouped there. They're grouped similarly in the report as well. The 8 coastal PDCs are all right members here to the TAC as well. Within coastal Virginia, we have 70% of the state's population and 78% of the state's GDP. A lot of people, a lot of importance to the economy. That economy affects the rest of the state and also goes beyond our state as well. So it's a very important region, just as the rest of the Commonwealth is, but we're faced with the challenge of sea level rise here. That's impacting this region.
And that might be it. I'll interject here. Senator Martin passed a few notes along because I don't know if we can get the audio to work. So I wanted to pass along a message from him, which is that Delegate Bulova covered it pretty well, but he'd like to add that severe weather events, especially in inland areas, are continuing and growing issues. So it's not just sea level rise. He wants to thank everyone here on the group for our work and what we will do. Apologize that we couldn't get things to work on our end, but maybe we can get them at a future meeting. We certainly appreciate his thoughtful leadership on this and look forward to working.
So now I'm going to go back into time. This was a 2020 document that was put out, the Coastal Resilience Master Planning Framework. There's 2 key components in this document: the goals of the master planning effort, and then the principles. So first, I want to go through the 4 goals that are in this framework document, referred to just as the framework. Prioritize projects. The framework calls out to identify what are our critical built and natural infrastructure, and the recurring themes: what is this critical infrastructure? What are we going to do to protect it? How do we prioritize what is most critical and important? Starts with which of the projects fix those needs. We've got a lot of projects. Projects require a lot of money. So how do we identify the financing strategies for these projects? We don't have enough money for all the work that could be done to this. So how do we come up with innovative financing strategies to try to leverage what financing we have? And where do we allocate the current funding? So priorities of the projects and the funding of those projects really go hand in hand. The next 2 goals, more holistic and a little more indirect, but how do we incorporate climate change projections across all state agency programs that may not be directly addressing sea level rise, coastal resilience, or flooding, but indirectly? Transportation planning, land use planning, community organizations. How do we, when we plan and look towards the future with different projects, be taking the future conditions into account, not necessarily we have some climate change projections, how do we get those used throughout the programs? And then lastly, coordinating our efforts. Communication, this is with our federal partners, tribal nations, state agencies, regional partners, EDCs, the communities themselves. How do we all work together, communicate and collaborate, and try not to do our efforts? So with those goals, what are the principles by which we try to accomplish those goals? One, let's use the best available science, acknowledge climate change is happening, there's consequences, and that we use the best available data to make the most informed and defensible decisions. Two, there are socioeconomic inequities that exist within the Commonwealth. Acknowledge them, try to address them with these projects, try to enhance equity where we can. Three, nature-based solutions. Where we can, try to make our solution as green as possible, reap the co-benefits of these nature-based solutions, and not just necessarily addressing flooding, but water quality, improving access to recreation. What co-benefits can we leverage by going after nature-based solutions? Try to get to scale, community and regional scale. This gets into collaboration, not just large-scale projects, but working together across different regions together towards common goals. And then lastly, cost-effective solutions. And we have limited funding. How do we use that money judiciously and wisely to achieve our goals? So those are the 5 principles that were established in the framework. They're repeated now in code for what we're trying to achieve with the statewide plan as well as the coastal. All right, so here's a summary of last year's efforts. I like to think of it as the state invested $1.5 million on this effort in short order, March to December, short time to get a lot of work done. I think we've got a great return on our investment here. This is the overview of what we did. So the next few slides, we're going to step through each part of the process, discuss what do we do, what are we doing now, where do we fall short, and maybe what more could be done. How do we do that? So I also want to promote, we do have the master plan, volume 1 done. Previous pack numbers got a copy. We have a few remaining copies available. If you would like one, please let us know. It's also available online. And then all of the data and information is online through our website. You can look and see where the impacts are, what's going on, where the projects are. We'll look to continue to update that when we explore that to be more living with that. High level accomplishments from phase 1. Really, if we do nothing, what are the consequences? What are the impacts? Sea level continues to rise, and we project out future water levels of today's people and assets and natural infrastructure. What do those impacts look like financially in the community? What are people doing? We establish a project database. This gets towards prioritization. You can't prioritize projects unless you know what projects are. Try to have enough commonality or attributes on those projects so you can compare them at state scale. So it's tough to do it from even community to prioritize across the Commonwealth here in the coastal region and compare apples to apples comparison, trying to get that underlying. Try to identify where can the Commonwealth support agencies, localities, and regions with our resources and try to take care of some use economies of scale. So we have this consistent statewide data set now where the flood exposure is. Those are some of the examples of things the Commonwealth can do to help others make more informed decisions. And then really try to build relationships. It takes people working together to get these solutions done. We started that last year and continuation from other efforts, but that's really what will be critical as we move forward. Relationships here within the TAC, beyond, communities, NGOs, all working towards common goals and values. But what did we do? Celebrated time in less than a year to get that work done. Did a great job getting done what we did in that time. There was limited public input on the process up front as well as the end delivery. And we had public meetings, but we always have more, try to gather more input from the public. And it's really just the assessment of the risk and how the one inaction, but what is the action to take? We really intend to plan and lay out a course of action in phase one. So go through each of these steps. So the top bar was the public stakeholder and task engagement. Some of the activities we completed last year, we did an individual survey for people in the coastal zone, survey of organizations or stakeholders, different localities, and organizations provided input. We got over 1,200 responses from those two surveys combined, and short order, limited notice, response rate. We had a lot of meetings, meetings, and subcommittee meetings. 67 of those meetings. It'll be a little tougher to do in person. We met and worked together a lot. Had 20 public meetings, 9 different working group meetings as well, and then established a website to promote that information and share. What have we been doing since? We created a meeting request form on our website that any organization, other agencies, just a more formal way to track meeting requests. We did have Civic Association take us up on it, and we went out there and talked, and that was one of our 14 presentations that we've done since releasing the plan. We've been at different conferences, different agencies that asked us to speak. We spoke to some of the PDCs that commission themselves, as well as some of their working groups. So we're trying to get this information out there, as well as we're hosting monthly NGO meetings to try to help coordinate our outreach and engagement efforts and put on our plan and try to work together to execute that plan. But what didn't we do in phase one? Then the outreach was limited. There was a lot of focus on our technical components of getting the data. And so outreach was not as expansive as it could have been. And neither the plan nor the framework were available for public.
So I think one of the things that we're going to come out of this, there wasn't a formal recommendation of the plan that's on here. We intend to put both the plan and the framework out for public comment. In the next couple of weeks, we'll open it up probably for a 30-day comment period to let folks weigh in on the finished document. Then we'll collect those comments and plan on recording those out. Future CAC meeting, we thought it was important. It's been out there for a while, and I think it's had some time for folks to absorb it, but always good to have an opportunity to do it formally, provide their feedback.
Some other recommendations from this component of the plan. How do we develop a sustainable public planning outreach engagement process? That's the keyword, sustainable. We had some meetings with the back, there was some plan policy. So how do we develop that plan? It's the outreach engagement plan that's due at the end of this year. And really trying to expand the tribal engagement and underserved community, understanding their cultural resources, and trying to work with them on plans in their nations and their areas. A lot of work to do. We got a lot of work done. There's always more work. Next, characterizing the hazard. So now getting into the technical study. We know where flooding will be out to the year 2100. Different water level scenarios. It was very accurate, continuous, high resolution product that people can use and leverage for their planning purposes. Great accomplishment. Really helps. They bring equity across the coastal region. Some locations already had data that was working, so others weren't. So now everybody has consistent data that they use. But the gap is only part of the risk in the coastal region. It includes marine, doesn't include stormwater or rain-driven precipitation flooding. So it's not everything, but it's a good picture of what can come. Recently, we added coastal flood hazard 2100. So where that water will be at year 2100 is available. It's on the Web Explorer, but it is available for download. So you can add it and look at it with a vector or raster. There's a link for sharing all this data through AWS Open Data Program. So everywhere it's out there. So some of the recommendations to identify the gaps, we need to include rainfall-driven, riverine, compound flooding, coastal erosion maps projections. Where is the shoreline going to be in the future? We can take into account erosion and not just water level rising. And then what are the impacts of groundwater? So where do we collect data and do analysis on groundwater impacts? All right, speaking of impacts, next part, we group the impacts in phase one by community resources, critical sector, natural resources. There's a lot more data and detail we can drill down within those main groupings, other groupings. And we also looked at the community context, the people that are impacted, what are the demographics of those people, overlaying social vulnerability and flood hazard exposure to try to see where both high social vulnerability and high flood exposure, to try to focus some of our outreach and try to see where those areas are there project gaps there. Again, some of the challenges we faced in that short time frame was data, accessibility, accuracy, trying to get it all in from different state agencies, federal sources. There's a lot of data, some anecdotal, some very curated at the local scale. But trying to do this analysis at scale under short order, we use the best available that we could find to work here. But there's always room for improvement of the data, the amount and the quality of that. And these are some of the recommendations. The asset level data, how do we know what's most critical, not just that it's in a critical sector, but what is the criticality of that asset to the community, to the region, to the state. Demographic data, there is new census data out there. We could update some of our community context information with. And then really getting into economic impacts. Dr. Nat from OU gave a presentation yesterday morning. It was referenced earlier. There's a large economic impact. So we provide direct impacts in the report, coverage annualized loss, but how do we project that out to overall economic impacts to the region, to the economy? That's another area. Project identification and evaluation. Set up the project database, set up a schema, collected a lot of projects from you all, especially the PDCs and localities. Appreciate your effort putting that in. We have a lot of projects. We tested a project evaluation approach. We're comfortable with it. The project evaluation approach can mirror the framework principles that we use for prioritization, but in short order, using just data. Prioritization can't be done just by computer. It needs input from people as well, and trying to have the time for that input into those priorities was a challenge for us. But we do have some great example reference projects. It's in the database. You can see what's going on, what's currently planned. We want to get more projects. Those are some of our gaps. How do we improve the database, make it more accessible, make it work for the evaluation as well? So that's some things that we're looking at and improving. This would be a web-based project owner access to the project database where you can edit your projects with updates, add a new project. Again, the state, in order to see these items at scale, try to collect it from the city or location. And there's also room for improvement with that, tying to other project databases. How do they talk together? Try to reduce the burden on people putting projects in. So potential training, a lot of recommendations of things we can do moving forward on projects, inflection as well as evaluation. Funding. So we have a funding database. We need to expand that database of what funding opportunities are there, but still more on the strategy. We haven't been able to update it. So again, working similar to the project database, but the funding database for DCR staff to go in there and keep it updated. So the current reference and not just the side. And then lastly, the document, the website, the web explorer, all great accomplishments of what we were able to do, but there's always room for improvement. So it's really, I would say phase one, make phase two kind of a plan and action. Phase one was a call to action. Then we made phase two the plan of action, say what we're going to do. So we didn't get that true plan, how we build coastal resilience and conflict. So that's that. So we can expand the database, the web explorer, the information, come up with a plan. Another recommendation was for the introduction to strategic relocation. That relocation is strategy. We didn't get into it in this. It's still in draft form. That was a recommendation from the report to get that continued to start the conversation. So what are we required to do for code? Similar to going back to General Assembly legislative requirements, House Bill 516 to 11. In phase two, by the end of calendar year 20, all major flood hazards, including precipitation-driven flooding, comprehensive risk assessment of critical natural infrastructure, and updating our projects. Those are the basic requirements for code. There were a lot of other requirements, recommendations made in the master plan report. Those recommendations that were highlighted there did not include the past recommendations and subcommittee recommendations. They're available in the document, Appendix A. So there's a lot of opportunities for improvement. It's very easy to ask what do we do moving forward? Then also relates to implementing the outreach engagement, the key part of getting that work done in coastal region as well as statewide.
I'm going to follow you there on that to see if anyone has any questions on this. Obviously, there's a tremendous amount of work went into this, especially considering the shortened time frame. There are a number of things that we are required to consider in phase two. I think it's an opportunity to chart a course, to develop a plan that can be used by the state, by localities to really help address the problem, turn into kind of a cohesive, coherent strategy. Do want to, just for kind of time check purposes, we've got a couple more things. My intent is to pause at 12:30 to make sure that we have time for public comment and then wrap up stuff afterwards. So if you have not signed up for the public comment sheet, somewhere around here in the back, if you want to comment, please sign up. If you're online, please drop that into the chat. But we'll plan on pausing around 12:30 to make sure we get the full 20 minutes in. We've got that many people that are interested in talking. Any questions before we proceed? We'll talk about the statewide. Yes.
Mr. Wells, Matt, thank you for the very thorough presentation. Just a couple questions on timing. I've noticed in here the mention of the strategic coastal relocation document. Do you have any idea when that will be released in draft? That's the topic of a lot of interest for our localities.
The draft got been finalized. It's finalized.
I don't think we have a timeline. That's the answer to that.
And then I know you have distributed a kind of some draft scope language for some of the technical work for phase two. Where do you have an idea of where we are in that process on some of the issues about kind of how the flooding analysis will be done, looking at the other sources of flooding?
You're referencing there was a scope document for the fluvial flooding, doing pilot study and then expanding that to the coastal region. That is still under consideration.
Yes, sir.
A follow-up actually to Ben's first question. I recall correctly that the draft relocation plan was put together or at least authored by a subcommittee Robert's hiding over there. Is the subcommittee, such a subcommittee being going to be reconvened to establish, to finish that up, or?
So my intent is to talk about subcommittees when we get a little bit further in the agenda. I think we've got some thoughts on sort of how those might flow with the legislative structure of the body, if there are others that we can certainly do that. And if there are things, one of the kind of the takeaways here are if there are things that we need to elevate up to this group to talk about, we can do that in future meetings. All right. Talk about the statewide plan.
Moving on, statewide.
This one's short.
Yes. So just a quick history. The flood protection plan for the state came out of House Act in 1989. First published in 89, 91, 2005. Has not been updated yet. In 2005, there was a statewide plan, came with a citizens guide, a locality guide, and then the overall statewide. Started to draft revisions in 2018, and I'll follow up that with more slides. What's required in that, again, you'll see these 5 items that have been in code: inventory of flood-prone areas, inventory of flood protection structures, damages, what are the strategies, and then the collection and distribution of all that needs to be on an online format and will be available in updated updates, and cover this mainly, but added. So the same items need to be in there, but it needs to adhere to the framework principles, best available science, socioeconomics, solutions, regional scale planning, and health effective solutions. So still have that added, due now, end of 2026. Needs to integrate into the coastal plan. And then another item added is that it must be done in a watershed-based approach. Watershed-based approach. As we're doing that, watershed-based approach is major river basins. And so we have a slide for the major river basins in Virginia, but there still needs to be more on. There we go. Here are our major river basins for a watershed-based approach. Most draining to the Chesapeake, going down to North Carolina, the Sound, and then others are actually going out towards Mississippi. And so here is an idea of how that plan could be broken down. And it's a lot to accomplish. And so, 4 years, this is all statewide, while still doing the coastal plan, the 5-year updates on zoning planning. So a lot of work to be done here.
And I will say, while there is pretty good data for the coastal part of the state, there's not great data for the western part of the state right now. So that's a significant gap as far as the first thing we try to tackle as part of the statewide plan.
And so right now we've been 2018 revision. Started currently. We're working on updating some of those chapters and sections to make sure that they're current today, now 4 years later. And then also waiting to see and get some more input from the community outreach engagement efforts to help inform and get this community outreach engagement plan. Anything on statewide?
I mean,
Yes.
The coastal resilience master plan must be incorporated into the statewide plan by 2026. Right?
it states that they need to be integrated.
So my question would be, is there a consideration that the phase 2 update of the coastal resilience master plan, will it take a watershed-based approach as well?
So could phase 2 watershed-based? Yes, it hasn't been, it's still determined, but we wouldn't be doing, and beyond capture the full watershed. But if we do fluvial work, include river re-flooding, those are watershed-based components to bring in the data. But I think from what we learned in the coastal plan is leveraging the existing planning organization, in short order for the coastal plan.
Matt, I have a quick question. On the eastern shore where there are no major rivers or watersheds, you're clumping all of the mini watersheds to the west and all to the east as one unit? Is that how you're dealing with the eastern shore?
So the Atlantic Ocean river basin.
Okay, and then on the west side of the continental divide of the eastern shore, that's all part of
That's big, that's,
the Chesapeake Bay coastal.
yes. That's correct, just. Right. So that integration between these river basins into the coastal plan. But if you're doing the analysis or
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Matt, you've heard mentioned several times the phase 2, and you said it's still under consideration. Do we have any time frame on what that consideration will be?
it is due at the end of 24. The consideration, if you're trying to work in earnest,
That was probably just as important to many of the stakeholders as, the regional coastal work that we did for the first phase. So I just want to make sure that that does not get forgotten.
Thanks.
I think one of the deliverables of this group is to elevate items that we think should be in phase 2. Again, aside from what we're required to have by statute.
May I make a comment to that?
Sure.
Jerry from Creative PDC was online. I think as a TAC committee, we could kind of kill, I don't say kill two birds with one stone.
Accomplish 2 goals in one.
Because I think if you use kind of this flooding protection plan, you can address some of the riverine flooding concerns that we're in phase 2. And if we can align them better, it might condense some of the work or put it into a more usable format for everybody. Because again, I'm speaking from Crater PDC's plan perspective. We have 2 basins, but one goes down into North Carolina. It's the majority, and then our coastal basin is the top. And so that's been an issue for us all along, is that, we're in coastal zone, but it doesn't affect a lot of our constituents because their work goes elsewhere. And so we could, kind of combine this flood protection master plan into that phase 2. I think we could accomplish more of that holistic Virginia-wide planning.
And I think the goal generally is to try to align these efforts as much as we can. There's a lot going on in space, plans and groups we have, studies that we're doing. So try to make those work together. But I think kind of broadly speaking, I don't want to speak for the legislators, but that is why this TAC is empowered to chime in on the statewide plan and not just the coastal plan, is to see if we can align those efforts. So, thank you. Okay.
Community outreach and engagement plan, already, again, due at the end of this year, access and opportunity, putting out a plan, people are aware what we're doing for outreach.
I want to thank Dr. Atkins and Michael Perez. say anything about. We've had some good conversations about the involvement in this process.
So seeking input for the development of this plan from tribes, CBOs, NGOs. CBOs, all the communities impacted by recurrent flooding, general public. So we're accomplishing this through, we've reached out to them through draft input. This document will go out for public comment and allow all to provide input at once. So here's an update on the current status. We're working on that draft document, trying to get it ready for an October release, 30-day public comment period and regulatory town hall for Virginia. Take those comments back and issue a final plan by the end of this calendar. Some of the data looking at as far as prioritization and where those outreach and engagement efforts can start. This is some of the historical flood risk data. We have flood events. We saw a big peak in 2018, very wet year. So a lot of flood events across the Commonwealth. But you also see the frequency of flood events using this data. It's really I-81 corridor, Shenandoah Valley. Flooding is more than just the coastal region. It is a statewide concern. It's back to the integration of statewide. And I think that is it for this presentation.
Okay. So, those are the presentations. If any questions about the outreach plan, I think when we meet next, we'll have some more definitive things to share on that. It'll have been out for public comment. I think we have a substantive report there. But just to clarify, the plan is what's due at the end of the year, and then the plan will be implemented in the course of the development of the other plans. All right. So we're going to go into committee discussion for the next 20 minutes. We'll take calls for public discussion. I do want to kind of lead off talking about subcommittees. You were asked about those. So I wanted to kind of talk through how we had envisioned approaching it, certainly open to suggestions. All right. Okay, so as a reminder, the part of the charge of this TAC is to ensure that the framework is adhered to future CRMPs. These are some of the items in the framework. And so we kind of took these as some buckets to use to develop subcommittees. So here are the general subcommittees that we would propose. We'll step through them with some more detail, but project prioritization, funding, research and data, and then outreach and coordination. So project prioritization would be to review critical build and natural infrastructure inventory, develop objective protocols for evaluating and prioritizing project needs, develop objective protocols for evaluating project alternatives, and identify resilience projects that are underway and gaps. So again, we don't have a great way of evaluating these projects in a holistic fashion. We can look at them one against the other, but we can't really look at a framework. So starting to develop the framework that we use to evaluate those. Funding, developing a financing strategy. The recommendation is how to leverage and align existing revenue streams. Recommending a process for public-private partnerships, including transportation and infrastructure. Research and data, effectively incorporating climate change projections and state and local programs, tracking ongoing research, and providing recommendations on best available data and practices. And outreach and coordination, which is what it says, assisting in developing and executing an outreach strategy, strengthening relationships with the Department of Defense, other federal facility owners, and strengthening relationships with our tribal nations. So, the next one. Okay, so those are the four subcommittees that we would propose, certainly open to others. I'll open it up for thoughts, feedback, comments. Because we're going to be asking you all to pick your top two.
Could I make a comment? for the outreach and coordination, I wonder if I think it makes sense to have an explicit objective related to equity, which is not reflected in these three objectives.
I will say that those were kind of sort of frameworks. The subcommittee has something they feel like is within their scope that they want to discuss. Certainly an important consideration.
In listening to our first talk to, I'm actually thinking of, not just myself, I'm thinking of the TAC members that come from universities, but probably means elsewhere, is I can look at them and see one that I think I can contribute the most to. But like my colleagues from other universities that are on TAC, they can probably also look at it and see what they can contribute to, but because we mentioned there being outside experts, we've got other outside expertise at our university, and we'll entertain that type of just recommendation.
Sure.
I mean, when not today.
Right. And you beat me to the punch. One of your other homework items is to send any recommendations for additional folks that you think need to be involved in the conversation. Whether they're TAG members, subcommittee members, and advisors, or other suggestions there. Not promising that we can include everyone that's already a very large group. You know, our goal is not to exclude any voices, but we do want to make sure that it stays functioning. I know that was a concern with the previous TAG, was that it got very large. Okay, so yes.
Well,
Go ahead.
One suggestion of, I don't see on here anything related to public policies or legal issues, so that might be something for us to consider adding to the subcommittee. Try to tackle things related to local government, state government, agencies, when laws, trailers.
I think public policy subcommittee seems appropriate. Now, again, we do want to keep in mind that the focus of the group remains on informing plans, so it would have to be in the context of it. We can try to flesh that out a little bit. By that, I mean Ben.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks, that could may contribute to the answer to my question too. One of the subcommittees that existed in the previous TAC was thinking through the economic development opportunities that are here, the innovation, the R&D that could be leading towards new solutions that fit into then the planning conversation. Do you see that as beyond the scope of this TAC, or?
I think that, you know, if you look at what some of the deliverables are in phase 2 in terms of trying to get to where we can prioritize projects, certainly leveraging innovation, public-private partnerships. Is that kind of what you're getting to?
Right. And the R&D work that's taking place through, say, Go Virginia funding and other kind of economic development funding within the state, looking at university industry partnerships, creating new solutions to bring to those projects. How does that, I'm trying to see where might that fall in these subcommittee structures as you're kind of laid out now.
So I think if you're talking about funding, then that would fall under funding, I imagine. If you're talking about, I mean, I can see it fitting into project prioritization. If the group is interested in establishing an economic development subcommittee, that's certainly something we can do. Do you want to take a swing at kind of framing that out a little bit? And talk? Sure. So here's what we'll do, because I know we've got a couple of suggestions, and people's selections might depend on what else we come up with. So we'll switch the homework up here a little bit and ask folks to send in additional or alternative thoughts on subcommittees. We'll circulate those, and then we can kind of talk it through. Does that work for everybody?
Sure. On the subcommittees, we're still subject to the FOIA requirements. Just as a reminder, in person, I know we have people coming from corners of the state. So that's some logistics that we'll stay at and try to work out how best to facilitate that, whether it's a subcommittee day or something, I don't know, but it is known that travel can be a challenge.
So as you all think of potentially some other items we want to designate, perhaps think of how we could combine efforts into buckets that make sense. Four seems to be a reasonable amount to ask people to participate in, if everybody is taking one or two, and then to ask staff to certainly can add more, but where we can find some overlap that might be.
Matt, apologies if you just said this and I missed it, but in response to Troy's question, it looks like you took finance and economic development and glommed together the funding. And the federal facilities was kind of glommed into outreach, right? So we have, looks like we're touching on the same topics, just in there.
Yeah, and that was our intent. Again, if folks feel like they need to split them out or they need to rearrange things again, the framework seemed to be a good framework. But those are the other calls. But we do want to be sensitive to creating so many subcommittees that they can never meet because there's not enough people or staff in. But anyway, take some time. We will. Is this in the package today?
Yes, this is
in your package. We'll send it around. Think on it. Go ahead and think about where you'd like to contribute. I would ask that everyone here participate in at least one subcommittee. Any other questions or comments on that? So we've got, so we would pause at 12:30. We've got another 12 minutes for committee discussion. I've got some other things that we can talk about, but we can also send those around as homework. So I want to kind of open it up to an opportunity for committee members. If anyone looks like there's something where they would like to share with you.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question about subcommittees and just kind of logistics of it. I know that in round one, we kind of had a little subcommittee overload, multiple subcommittees, and it looks like we're trying to address this by having fewer. And I think in our charter, and this is just a recommendation, something for thought or discussion, I might recommend that we keep like a limit for, let's just say 4 to 6 subcommittees. But then under those subcommittees, we said we could kind of have added like as needed for the subcommittee where we bring in expertise. For example, like research and data, economic development or future economic, that could fall under research, right? And so we could have just like a for lack of a better word, a subcommittee within that, just to touch on those topics that and maybe the TAC could decide which subcommittee would fall into, just to kind of give the subcommittees a little more, I guess, and B, to prevent subcommittee overload.
I think that's an excellent point. What I would ask for folks who want to send in thoughts on subcommittees and topics, really focus in on the areas that you think those subcommittees should cover, because there might be opportunities to shift some of these items around a little bit or to combine them as well, so that we're covering the ground that folks would like to cover in a way that doesn't lead to 100 different subcommittees.
Yeah.
Any others? Board over the group. All right, I've got just a couple things that I'm going to send around asking folks for next meeting. One, any comments that you all have on phase 1 of the master plan or on the framework. Said we're going to put those out for public comment. We will summarize the public comment. We will summarize your comments. That'll be a main portion of the next meeting to talk through anything that we received there. Items that we, another topic, discussion point for a future meeting would be anything that we didn't cover for phase 2 that you think should be in phase 2 or something that phase 1 missed. Again, in your comment, but in particular things that should be addressed in phase 2. Again, we're going to get, as we get rolling on that, we want to have a good basis to start from. So if there are things that you all think we should be covering, it's good to know those up front so we can talk about those thoughts. Potential topics for future meetings are always welcome. Potential locations for future meetings are. I think one of the governor's charges to us administration folks is to get out of Richmond. I like getting out of Richmond. Keep in mind that we are somewhat restricted in where we can meet because of the size of the group and our need to live stream things, but certainly would welcome field trips and opportunities to go visit other parts of the state. And then again, recommendations for others who should be in the room at the table, invited to participate, invited to present. So we'll send all of that out. I think just for housekeeping, probably targeting early December for the next meeting. We will get around a Google call for everyone. My goal for future meetings would be to have this be as interactive as possible. I know there was a lot of talking at you today, but we wanted to catch everybody up to speed. I know a lot of you have been involved in the past, but this is new to some folks, or some folks haven't been living it as much. We felt like there's been enough movement on things that a refresher was good for everybody, but our hope is to have this be more discussion. With that, unless any other member of the TAC has something they would like to elevate, okay, we will go to public resiliency. Okay, so we'll go to the chief first, and then we'll go online next. How many online signs do we have? None. All right.
I guess could you announce that for anybody that is online, and if you would like to provide public comment, please write your name into the chat. There's a little circle with 3 dots in it. Open that chat window, and please let us know that you'd like to make a public comment. Thank you.
Okay. So on the sign-up sheet, I have Jay Ford. Ford. You can do it over there if you want to. Or you want to do it.
Does it work for everybody? Can you hear me? All right. Jay Ford, Chesapeake Bay Foundation. I will be brief. I know better to stand between someone and the end of the Friday meeting. So I will keep it really to 2 points. And that is, first of all, thank you, Mr. Secretary and Director Wells, as well as all of you for coming together on this absolutely critical topic. I would point out that when we look at where the last CRMP left off, Mr. Dallin did an excellent job of covering some of those gaps. But one area that I would ask you all to really focus on is the gaps in data around critical natural infrastructure. This came up repeatedly throughout the last TAC. There was very real concerns about the accuracy of the data around wetlands, data that we had available for marsh migration and those corridors. As we've heard many times today, natural infrastructure is not only the state's preferred methodology, but it is the approach that gives us the highest return on investment here in Virginia. As someone from the Bay Foundation, I feel compelled to remind us all we have obligations, both financially and in statute to the Bay. And the work that you all are doing is inextricably linked to that work. How Virginia adapts, what our resilience plan looks like, can either help or hinder our efforts at a restored Bay. And so making sure we fill that gap as soon as possible is really critical, because as you all know from your respective worlds, these projects take years to get in the pipeline. So if we don't have that data now, it pushes this further and further down the line for us to really come up with a truly resilient plan. Along those same lines, I would say thank you for all the thoughtful consideration around additional members that might be involved. I would highlight and encourage you all to invite members of the NGO community who have expertise in both water quality, policy and science, as well as some of these ecosystem service questions that came up throughout the last TAC. And that's all for today. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. All right. I have, I think, 2 folks from EDF, Grace Tucker and Emily Stein Hilbert, Stein.
New one, but you got it right.
All right, either of you, if you could speak up so that the mics.
Thanks. Hopefully the mic can pick me up. Emily Steinhilber, Duty Director for EDF, and thanks to you all, and really to the staff for all the work that they did in the last phase and in putting this together for you all. To reiterate a few of Jay's comments, the work that you all have before you and that the staff has before them is huge. And I think that one of you all raised the question of tying together the next phase of the Coastal Resilience Master Plan with the Virginia-wide plan, and then also with the funding source, with the CFPF and the project prioritization that hopefully a committee will tackle moving forward. And so that work is incredibly important for Virginia as we move forward to identify how we'll prioritize these projects across the really varied landscape across the state. And so in addition to the co-benefits that Jay pointed out, Karen raised the issue of equity on one of the subcommittees, and I think it's incredibly important that this committee and the staff continue to center that work in their outreach and in the way that they approach data and the economic development piece as well. And then to wrap up, I'd just like to reiterate as well that the NGO community can provide a lot of value to this committee and to the work moving forward, and it's really ready to help move Virginia forward, whether it's looking at the way that other states have tackled these problems and learning lessons, or providing technical expertise on water quality or resilience or every other aspect of this. We're here to help.
Thank you.
So,
All right, and my last sign up is Ross Weaver with Wetlands Watch.
Good afternoon, thanks for your time. Ross Weaver, Program Assistant Director for Wetlands Watch. I'd just like to echo what Jay and Emily said. Wetlands Watch served as a TAC in the past, and really hopeful that that will be expanded to include conservation organizations, nonprofits. There's a whole lot of technical expertise within these entities. As Emily said, we're always looking forward to helping out. I'll be quick. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to make a comment? Anyone online?
Nobody signed up online.
All right. We very much appreciate the public commentary from folks and people showing up on a lovely Friday afternoon to spend their time with us here over the lunch hour. I promise we will try to not schedule these things at this time. This is kind of the only time frame to work for the room today. So unless there's any other comments from the TAC, I'll just close by saying thank you to all of you for your willingness to serve on this. This is a critically important issue. It is a big issue. It's not one that I think anybody would claim to have a monopoly on all the answers for. So I think all of us working together can significantly move the ball forward and inform the next plan we put together to make it a fantastic work product. And I'll turn it back over to Secretary Boyles to adjourn us.
Yeah, thank you all. Repeat everything Pat said. Appreciate the time and appreciate all the time and effort that was helpful. It's a better place to live. And that we are doing the same thing on our end.
With that, we stand adjourned. Thanks, everybody.